Okay, so here we are. Hi, and welcome to the Sierra Club-Loxahatchee Group General Meeting. We had a very large number of people tonight, so hopefully they'll all be trickling in. Tonight's program is Clean Water Conservation 101, Florida's Water Quality Crisis, Harmful Algae Blooms, and Slime Crimes. My name is Linda Smith, the current XCOM chair. Our chat monitor tonight is Glenn Laufer, one of our 9-member executive committee members, and also our events chair extraordinaire. I always start the meeting with trying to announce our website. You go there for anything local information. We do a very good job of keeping it as up to date as we can. There's also all of our contact information there, etc. So please check out our website. If you go there about once a month, there'll be something new, even if it's just a meeting announcement. At the bottom of the home page is our list of calendar events. I'm asking everyone to just scroll down there occasionally, and if you see something, please feel free to join. This month's upcoming meetings are highlighted here, and if you're interested, please feel free to join us. You go to the website and click the calendar, like I just said. This will give you all the Zoom links and telephone access to these meetings. Membership is not required, but encouraged. So come learn about what we're about and what we are working on. Of course, we need you. We need volunteers, and I hope you will join us on a committee or just as a member. Conservation is really what we're all about. And we have an awful lot of things going on in the coming months on conservation. Palm Beach County news. There is not going to be a Matters by the Public in August. I guess it's too hot, but be sure to mark your calendars for Tuesday, September 13th at 2 o'clock. You get 2 minutes to talk about anything you want, and we suggest environmental topics. Believe me, you won't run out of issues to talk about. August, as you can see on this slide, is a very busy month for the Agricultural Reserve. We will be posting more information in the calendar for some of these upcoming meetings, as the commissioners do not post their agendas until a week before the meeting, which doesn't give us much time to get information out. If you need some extra information, please feel free to reach out to Drew Martin, our Conservation Committee Chair, for updates. The Loxahatchee Group is a big geographic area covering Okeechobee, St. Lucie, Martin, and Palm Beach County. This slide gives you some information on St. Lucie County. Martin County is waiting for a big commissioners meeting, stopping the rural lifestyles. This is going to be a huge amendment to the comprehensive plan, so stay tuned for news on Martin County. Unfortunately, St. Lucie County is having a large rock mine being put in right next to and through a wetland. So we're going to try to motivate to stop that. And events. Please contact our chat monitor, Glenn Laufer, to become involved in our events. They may seem a long way away, but time flies. We also will not be having a general meeting in August. It's just too darn hot, but please be sure to mark your calendar for September 22nd. This meeting is going to be presented by the Ocean Conservancy, who will be celebrating their 50th year in September. The program is Currents and Crossroads, a vision for Florida's ocean and coasts. So please mark your calendar. We are going to have a mystery question tonight. We actually got this idea from the Broward group. It adds a little fun to the meeting and sharpens your listening skills. At the end of tonight's meeting, we are going to have a quiz, a 1-question quiz. Whoever gets the correct answer in the chat first will win this wonderful copy of Finding Eco Happiness, which was actually written by our Sublime Turtle Tracks newsletter editor, Sandy Schwartz. If you win the book, I will just need to ask you for the proper mailing address. I would not want it to go astray. And Glenn, are there any questions in the chat? Oh, you're muted, Glenn.
No, not yet. No questions. So I'm letting people in.
Oh, okay, thank you. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Michael McGrath, an organizing representative for Sierra Club Florida's Red Tide and Wildlands campaign. He's based in Fort Myers, and he works and partners with environmental advocacy and civic organizations around local, regional, and statewide land and water issues. Michael's organizing work focuses on water quality standards that stop pollution at its source, promoting urban fertilizer ordinances, springs protections, Everglades restoration, endangered species protection, landscape conservation programs, stopping phosphate mining, and protecting wild and rural lands from development pressures. McGrath's organizing experience has underpinned his experience in both urban and rural settings. Prior to joining Sierra Club, he worked for an accredited land trust where he coordinated community conservation projects for a regional conservation partnership in rural Western Massachusetts. He is a busy guy, and I want to thank him for taking time out of his busy schedule to join us tonight. So, Michael, I will stop sharing, which should allow you to start sharing.
Lovely. Well, thank you so much again for having me. I'm also keeping getting distracted by folks coming into the chat as well. So if I get distracted for any reason at any point in time, just because I'm also seeing people coming into the chat or into the Zoom room. But thank you so much for having me tonight. It's great to be here at the Loxahatchee group. As Linda said, my name is Michael McGrath, based in Fort Myers. I help to lead our chapter's statewide water quality campaign and also land conservation / wildlife conservation campaigns. And yeah, just delightful to be here with you all to talk about some of the threats that Florida faces in regards to water quality issues. And, really, when you really think about it, the slime crimes are being committed upon the public, right? We have a serious water quality crisis in our state. It's inescapable no matter where you live, whether you're living on St. Johns River or, the Indian River Lagoon, or if you're in the Loxahatchee or you're over on the Santa Fe, right? Every single body of water that's precious and treasured in our state is impaired. It's overpolluted, right? And we have sick waterways, and we need to do something about it to stop the slime, so to say. So I'm going to get into some of the things around harmful algae blooms, our state's water quality crisis, and also some of the things that Sierra Club would see as what would be better alternatives for promotion as far as regulating and also stopping pollution at its source. So we'll get into things. And as folks have questions, by all means, feel free to drop your questions into the chat, and we'll be able to address those at the end of tonight's presentation. But just want to confirm folks can see my screen. It should have fight slime crimes on the left-hand side. I see a thumbs up, so we'll dive in. But before we get into anything else, I just want to have a moment of silence for the dead and the dying, really paying homage to Florida's imperiled and also overpolluted water bodies. Just want to kind of show folks some images over the years that just kind of show just how long, our overpollution of our waterways has been going on in Florida, and how long we've been fighting these toxic, harmful algae blooms in our state. So yeah, I think folks know that, it's been really staggering to see what's been going on in Florida as of late, right? These are photos that have been going on for, more than 15, 16 years, right? And we could find photos and images that go back well before that as well. And what we have to really remember in Florida is that the environment really is the economy, right? And if we have these slimy situations in Florida, it's bad for our economy and it's also bad for taxpayers, right? This really is a quality of life issue, if you ask me. We need to be able to protect our waterways, whether it be our springs, our coasts, our rivers, our beloved beaches, our lakes, from being overpolluted with nutrient pollution from various sources. And when we had that really pronounced red tide bloom, back in 2017 to 2019, there was actually a University of Florida IFAS report that actually estimated that there was over $180 million in lost revenues to industries going up from basically Naples all the way up to Tampa Bay. And we know that, these various ecotourism operations and businesses really contribute billions of dollars annually to Florida's economy, right? And Florida, more than I think you could make the argument for any other state in the nation, really depends upon clean water. This is really something that really affects livelihoods of millions of Floridians, people's investments in their properties. So this is a huge issue, right, for Florida, and something that really needs to be addressed. So Florida, unfortunately, though, has a very bad policy arena. Every single state agency is guilty of promoting some sort of bad policy. Our past two administrations with Governor Rick Scott and also currently Governor DeSantis have done nothing really to improve policy around a number of the agencies, whether it be for FDACS for Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, or the DEP, Department of Environmental Protection, which they run as far as their executive branch, or really anything related to Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, Florida Department of Transportation, Department of Economic Opportunity, or any of a number of water management districts here in Florida, the 5 water management districts. Obviously for you all, you have the South Florida Water Management District. All of these districts, all these agencies are failing to actually promote policies that address pollution at its source, and instead actually seek to deal with things after the fact. And obviously the legislature is not helping with that either. We see, session after session, a failure to actually create any sort of meaningful changes that actually improves policy on a statewide level and actually regulates pollution in a comprehensive way. So I just want to kind of, ask the audience, what are some things that you guys know about harmful algae blooms in Florida? And that this is, hint, hint, will be on the quiz later tonight. What are some things that folks know about harmful algae blooms in Florida, such as blue-green algae and also red tide? By all means, come off mute and just feel free to chime in for a moment.
Big Sugar is putting about 400 pounds of fertilizer onto per acre out of the 600,000 acres during various stages of their crop raising.
Yeah, thank you, Ed. Yeah, definitely. Big Sugar is definitely overpolluting, the Everglades agriculture area and also things southward of that as well. Others, what and that's fueling, these algae blooms, I think was what Ed would probably insinuate with that as well. What other things do folks know about harmful algae blooms within Florida?
I believe that fertilizers containing phosphorus contribute to algae.
Okay, yeah, definitely. So Bruce definitely identified one of the key nutrients that fuel both blue-green algae and also red tide. So the other one being nitrogen, and we'll get into that as well. But yes, phosphorus and nitrogen are two of the nutrients that really fuel harmful algae blooms. What else? We'll take one more, and then I'll just kind of cover some basics around these two arch enemies of Florida.
200 million septic tanks. 2 million septic tanks. I'm sorry, 2 million septic tanks.
Okay, I actually don't know the figure off the top of my head, Ed, but I'm glad that you raised the septic tank issue, because we will get into kind of the largest sources of pollution in a moment, and oftentimes actually people want to blame septic tanks as the fault within Florida, right? And we'll address some of that myth there as well. Okay, so thanks for bringing that up, actually. So the first thing is that we'll cover blue-green algae. So blue-green algae, people oftentimes call it algae, but it's actually, get this, it's actually a cyanobacteria. As a cyanobacteria, it's a photosynthetic microorganism that actually can process sunlight just like an algae can, right? And really, blue-green algae is able to really bloom when it actually gets a lot of really stagnant water, right? When there's not a lot of turbulence in the water, that's when blue-green algae is able to really bloom and thrives really in these hot conditions, right? Such as the summertime, right? So if you have stagnant water that's very calm and it's very hot, right? That's creates conditions for much more susceptible for a blue-green algae bloom. You add lots and lots of phosphorus and nitrogen, it can actually utilize those nutrients very, very well. So where in Florida, where we have very stagnant water that's calm and also gets really hot in the summertime? Lake Okeechobee, right? Or many of our lakes throughout Florida, right? And that's why we have such issues with blue-green algae as well. And you often, if you've ever been around, blue-green algae, you'll actually smell it before you see it. It smells absolutely like death, honestly. And the thing that's actually really concerning is that when it's actually in high enough concentrations, it actually can create a multitude of toxins, most notably microcystin toxins, which have actually been linked to various neurodegenerative diseases such as ALS and also Alzheimer's. So this is also a harmful algae bloom that also has some public health concerns as well. The next one, red tide. This one is not as much of a concern on your coast, but I'm coming from Fort Myers, and we have a statewide water quality crisis, and it's obviously a big concern for the west coast of Florida. Corynea brevis is a single-celled marine dinoflagellate. It's more often found. It's almost exclusively found within saltwater or marine environments. And when you have a population bloom, that's what's actually known as a red tide bloom, right? So the Corynea brevis is like the organism, and the congregation, that's when it creates a red tide bloom, right? And really, when we actually look at the statistical information and also the longitudinal data over the last 30 years, we can unequivocally say that red tide blooms have been increasing in scope and also intensity, right? And a lot of the reasons for this is because of the increase in amounts of population within Florida, and also the fact that we have not been addressing, our sources of pollution from our growing population, and also because of the fact that climate change actually is amplifying and also increasing the intensity and also severity of these blooms as things get hotter and hotter, right? Corynea brevis is also a very good eater, right? It's kind of like Pac-Man. It can utilize actually 12 different forms of nutrients. And really can actually, can really just, be something that can be very difficult to get rid of once it starts blooming, when it actually a bloom does occur. So there also is some public health concerns with red tide, just like blue-green algae. It can actually produce brevetoxins, which when with a high enough concentration can actually be deadly to various fish. That's why you see these fish kills occur where, it just gunks up canals, or where we see dead fish wash ashore as well, or even dolphins, manatees, sea turtles, etc., right? Or as you might have seen that picture at the very beginning, a 17-foot whale shark, right? When it's in high enough concentrations. But these brevetoxins also, actually can create irritation in people's eyes and lungs, right? I'm not sure if anyone's ever been to the West Coast during a red tide bloom. Unfortunately, we have, it's kind of a normal occurrence for many folks on the West Coast, but, you'll actually see lots of cases where people have, various respiratory issues, and people who have acute asthma, there's actually always a high spike in people going to emergency room visits at hospitals during a severe red tide bloom. So there's definitely some public health concerns with red tide as well. So I want to kind of shift next to the blue-green algae task force. And, are folks familiar with this by chance? This is something that, Governor Ron DeSantis, during his campaign run back in 2018, right, was said that we're going to put all hands on deck, and we are going to create a task force that's going to study this bloom, this water quality crisis we're having back in 2017, 2018, right? And we're actually going to address this situation here. We're actually going to get, some scientific minds on this to actually figure out how we can actually address the problem, right? And, for Governor DeSantis' credit, right, he actually did pick, very distinguished scientists, right? And they met for more than a dozen times. And they actually issued back in October of 2019 something called a consensus document, right? But the better phrase probably would have been like, basically how to stop slime crimes within Florida. And, basically they had these really great scientific foundations and also recommendations for actually addressing the water woes within Florida. But the fact of the matter is, all that consensus document has done is just pick up dust on a shelf, right? They've done actually nothing to implement the findings and also scientific recommendations of this consensus document that comes from the scientific community, right? So for 3 years in a row now, right, the legislature has failed to pass legislation that would implement the vast majority of the recommendations of the Blue-Green Algae Task Force, right? Maybe folks remember the 2020 Clean Waterway Act, which is probably should have been known more as the Dirty Waterway Act or the Window Dressing Act, right? It fell far short, right, of even the high level recommendations issued by the task force. And in a very tragic chain of events, in 2021, FDP actually argued against implementing the recommendations of the Blue-Green Algae Task Force, right? Senate Bill 1522 or House Bill 1225 actually would have set up the enforcement pollution rule set up by statewide water quality monitoring system and address agricultural pollution, but was allowed to die in committee, right? So this is a bill back in there in the 2021 legislative session, right? That would have actually implemented some of those recommendations, but it actually just died in the ag committee. It was never actually allowed to reach on the general floor, right? So the question we have to ask ourselves, right, is Governor DeSantis' administration actually serious about addressing our statewide water quality crisis, or is it all just for political theatrics, right? So why spend money? Why spend taxpayer dollars on this task force, right, if the recommendations are actually being ignored? And second question, we have to also be thinking about, especially as we enter this election season and also, upcoming legislative session, is, are the task force members complicit if they remain silent? The scientific, scientists, right, who basically, worked on taxpayer funds, right, to actually create this document, right, and who have been used and also heralded as Governor DeSantis' various press events and also photo ops, right, as people who have been saying like we have the brightest minds in states working on this issue, right? If they're not actually speaking the truth with what's actually happening with the legislature and also with DeSantis' failure to actually promote and also ensure that these recommendations get implemented, are they complicit in the silence? So anyways, we're going to get into some of the things. We've already kind of touched upon a lot of this, but you already guessed what's causing our water quality crisis. It is an over pollution of nutrient pollution, right? The two main culprits are nitrogen and phosphorus, right? So we see nitrogen and phosphorus being over polluted into our water basins or our watersheds. And basically this pollution is carried from by stormwater into various receiving water bodies, right? Whether it be a lake or river or a spring or the bay or the Gulf of Mexico or the Atlantic Ocean, right? Everything that you can basically equate a water basin or a watershed like a bathroom sink. Like everything that falls into that basin ends up in the same place, into that receiving water body. And then when you have oversaturation of nutrients, it fuels these harmful algae blooms, killing off seagrasses, causing fish kills, etc. For now, we're going to go into the three main sources of pollution. There are really three main culprits. The first one is sewage, right? Sewage can come from a variety of sources, can come from faulty wastewater treatment facilities or septic tanks, right? I forget the gentleman who mentioned it earlier, right? But yes, septic tanks is an issue with in Florida, and also the fact that we have faulty wastewater treatment facilities that aren't done by advanced wastewater treatment standards. That also is an issue. We also have on the far left-hand screen, you can see right here, this is a dump truck, right? Does anyone know what that is? Does anyone by chance know what that is? It's biosolids. We'll get into biosolids a little bit later in the presentation, but we create a lot of biosolids here in Florida, right? And we're depositing these biosolids onto various ag lands throughout the state. And biosolids is just kind of a euphemism for like basically somewhat processed human waste that's been dried out, and then you can basically put it onto land. I see Glenn laughing a little bit over there. it's nasty stuff, and there's various legacy contaminants in there as well, such as PFAS. People heard of that. So that's the first one, right? The second one is animal waste, right? So manure, right, comes from cows, poultry, but also dog poop. There's a lot of dogs in Florida. And, when you take the aggregate of all that dog poop, it also adds up as well. But by far, the biggest sources of manure are, coming from industrial agriculture, from cows and also poultry. And then the last one, that by far the biggest source of pollution, right, is fertilizer, right? There's really two categories of fertilizer. There's urban fertilizer, right? What people put on their lawns, right? And also there is agriculture fertilizer, right? The fertilizer that we put onto row crops, such as corn, soy, peanuts, watermelon, right? All these sorts of things are things that, are examples of, row crops that we see excessive amounts of agricultural fertilizer that are unfortunately required within our current industrialized model of doing agriculture. And, by far, agriculture is by far the greatest source of pollution to our various waterways throughout the entire state of Florida. It doesn't matter what part of the state you're in. Certainly it's going to be on a watershed by watershed basis, but the vast majority of watersheds and also the vast majority of FDEP basin management action plans identify agriculture pollution as the number one source of pollution. So just keep that in mind. So Sierra Club water policy, here's kind of a brief overview on kind of at a high level of Sierra Club water policy, right? Our policy has always been to promote action that is protective or restorative as the ecosystem or flora fauna needs it, right? We always try and argue for the things that actually going to protect our waterways, protect our quality of life, right? We're not, as an organization, in the business of making sweetheart deals. We've never been in the business of catering to agencies or politicians or polluters, right? As much as they would like to get us to fund us to get us to weaken our positions, that's just not what we do, right? We call a spade a spade. We speak truth to power. And I think people know that, and that's why people will get involved with the Sierra Club as a membership organization. Our positions are always based on substantiated science, right? And essentially, we always tell policymakers what needs to happen in order for things to be fixed. We're not among the players in the environmental community that broker deals in order to claim victory, to do a photo op or do a press conference. If we're going to stand with a ribbon cutting ceremony, right, to say that this is a victory for the Everglades or for the Springs or whatever else, right? At the end of the day, we focus on telling policymakers the truth, no matter how much that hurts. So I just want to provide that as a kind of a high level overview, right? The short version of our water quality policy is that basically currently water quality and quantity statutes are full of loopholes and empty promises of restoration in 35 years, right? That's kind of related to basin management action plans, right? That's something that we can maybe get into if folks have more questions on. But what's really important to recognize is that water quality and quantity is interconnected. So for water quality, Florida must stop pollution at its source rather than cleaning up after the fact, right? That means we need to strictly regulate fertilizer, septic tanks, stormwater, sewage systems, and biosolids, right? Meanwhile, for water quantity, we've got to put limits put limits on permits to withdrawals that will not harm our natural systems. That refers to consumptive use permits that come from the various water management districts throughout the state. Our water quality crisis, right? So when we have these toxic blue-green algae blooms or red tide and murky springs that threaten public health, they threaten also our waterfront economies and also our state's reputation as a tourist destination, right? Manatees, the manatee dive that we've seen in the last 2 years, right, really is one of the many indicators of the failure of our state's water quality policies. And we're at a tipping point, simply put. So we're going to start with our policy related to urban fertilizer policy. This has really been one of the backbones of our red tide, statewide water quality campaign. And it's been one of the backbones of water quality protection for Florida over the last 15 years. Since 2007, Sierra Club has had a hand in, passing over 18 countywide urban fertilizer ordinances that have also touched upon over 100 municipalities, right? Loxahatchee was lucky to see that both Martin and also St. Lucie counties have a strict rainy season ban on urban fertilizer. Basically prevents, excessive nutrients from getting into from washing off people's lawns into, canal or into the lakes or rivers or streams that are near in your community. But it should be noted that Palm Beach County does not have a statewide urban fertilizer ordinance right now. So that's something that you guys can kind of keep at the back of your minds for those of you who live in Palm Beach County. When we say strong urban fertilizer ordinance, we mean a strict, no exemption, rainy season application ban on nitrogen and phosphorus from June 1st until September 30th, right? The rainy season, right? Anytime you have excessive rain events, more than, an inch of rain occurring at one time, it washes those nutrients away into a receiving water body. We also have some other provisions that, relate to the fertilizer content and also application rate. Basically, those are no more than 4 pounds of nitrogen per 1,000 square feet applied in any calendar year, right? And also no more than 1 pound of total nitrogen per 1,000 square feet per application. There's also requirements for minimum slow release nitrogen content requirements of 50%, but we also have a goal that we'd like to see that be more than 65% when we're making these ordinances. And finally, we want to see a fertilizer-free zone, right? Essentially, think like a buffer, right? A buffer between the water body and also where you can apply fertilizer in your lawns of at least 10 feet, but preferably 15 feet. And also the most recent ordinances actually within Miami-Dade and also within Orange County, they've been doing 20 feet actually. So basically a 20-foot fertilizer-free zone from the bank or edge of any surface water or, receiving water body, canal, etc., wetland, that sort of stuff. So our septic tank and also central sewer conversion policy, really we support septic to central sewer conversions in areas that are already highly urbanized, with priorities on communities that have septic tanks adjacent to major canals, waterfronts, or vulnerable to sea level rise. We do want to support mandatory inspections for older septic systems. And also we want, if there is, in the case that there is inferior or conventional failing septic tanks, we recommend replacing that with on-site sewage and disposal systems in rural areas to address really the pollution in a way that avoids creating the sprawl potential from a countywide central sewer system. And, the reason why we add this caveat is because really when you think about anytime you put in central sewer within a rural community, history has proven time and time again that you put central sewer in there, development is going to follow, right? And the question to ask ourselves is, conversions from septic to central sewer outside of an already urbanized area, if that's going to encourage sprawl, what's worse for the watershed and also the wildlife in the area? Septic tanks in a rural setting or new roads and sprawl that make managing stormwater and also destroy the habitat of wildlife as well. So that's kind of the way that we thread the needle on that one within our septic to sewer conversion policy. So in an ideal world, we'd actually have agricultural best management practices that actually work. Our best management practices or, BMPs are the only regulatory means of reducing agricultural pollution. To stop agricultural pollution means that we need to contain nitrogen and phosphorus, in ways that actually keep those sources of pollution on site, right? And to do that, have best management practices that actually accomplish that, we need them actually be mandatory, verified, and also be confirmed protective. All the things which they currently are not, right? We see across the board within the state when it comes to agriculture BMPs that they're basically largely voluntary, right? And there's actually no monitoring or enforcement going on with our agriculture BMP programs. So basically, we're seeing an overpollution coming from that. So again, that means retaining stormwater and also irrigation runoff to then recycle it before it leaves the farm, right? And according to the Basin Management Action Plans developed by Florida's Department of Environmental Protection, more than 2/3 of the nitrogen loading to impaired outstanding Florida springs is a result of agricultural activities. It's undoubtedly the same within the Everglades system as well. And that's more than, septic tanks, wastewater treatment facilities, and urban and sports fertilizer combined. So again, right, this is the largest culprit of fertilizer, of pollution to our waterways across the entire state, whether it's in the Springs in North Florida or in the Everglades in South Florida. How many folks like fishing on Lake Okeechobee? Maybe you guys have been out there before and you've seen all of the, the invasive plants. Many people say that if you're a big angler or a big sportsman, FWC is public enemy #1 because of all the spraying they do. Our policy really, we want when it comes to aquatic herbicide and also managing invasive plants, we want to stop the spray, right, and also implement instead mechanical harvesting. There are a number of agencies that are guilty of this. Obviously, FWC gets the lion's share of attention. But the water management districts also do this, as well as the Army Corps of Engineers and also local governments, right? And they spray these herbicides onto invasive and also aggressive flora, such as hydrilla, water hyacinth, and other invasives, right, on our lakes, our rivers, most infamously Lake Okeechobee and also the Kissimmee Chain Lakes. But really they're spraying a herbicide that contains various carcinogenic chemicals such as glyphosate, right? And actually, there was actually a report that was released from the Center for Biological Diversity maybe 2 years ago, maybe a year and a half ago, that actually found that most of the manatees in Florida now actually have trace amounts of glyphosate within their systems. So there's a glyphosate concern, but there's also the concern that's also overlooked is the fact that, this actually adds an additional nutrient source of nutrient pollution to our waterways as well. And think about it, right? Just like, if you were to take any of your grass clippings, right, you wouldn't deposit them into the canal or into the stormwater system, like into your just into the receiving water body, because they would actually, when you have the deposition of vegetative matter, it actually would result in it re-releasing those re-releasing those nutrients that absorbs, right, such as nitrogen and phosphorus, and would actually, then continue to add to the vicious cycle, just adding more and more nutrients to a water body. So basically our policy is to stop the spray and to instead find ways to mechanically harvest it or other ways of harvesting this invasive material. So yeah, I kind of covered a lot of this, right? We want to, stop the spray in all Florida water bodies. We want to really invest in the infrastructure and also incentives to adopt mechanical harvesting policies and practices that actually prevent this from being re-released into the water column. And one thing that should be noticed, right, is that, this is actually a very valuable resource. Currently we're actually leaving a valuable resource that could actually be harvested and actually be put into use for creating compost or, other soil amendments or biochars, right? And actually could actually help support the basis for new agri-industries, right? Think about if we could actually take all of that wasted resource right now and actually transform it into something that actually could be used to actually create more sustainable versions of agriculture instead, right? We also support the removal of the preemption on local regulation of herbicides and also pesticides. And it should be noted that FTP recognizes the importance of harvesting rather than killing nuisance aquatic flora within the Indian River Lagoon watershed, as it gets credits within its BMAPs for when you actually harvest it with mechanical means rather and for nutrient removal instead. So that's something that should be explored, right? Is how can we create more BMAP credits for doing mechanical harvesting of invasive vegetation. So when it comes to wastewater treatment system policies, we support mandatory standards, right, which are oftentimes known as advanced wastewater treatment facilities. Or higher, right, for basically creating the systems for managing human waste. But we also don't want to see the funding also upgrades of enforcement for these various advanced wastewater treatment facilities coming from the Land Acquisition Trust Fund. We've seen, inappropriate use of those funds in the past, where basically local governments are applying for funding from the LATF. For helping to improve their AWTs. That's not what we want to see. We want to see that fund go towards land acquisition, right, as the name implies, right, for wildlife conservation, protect open spaces. So just one caveat we want to make sure people are aware of on that. And we want to establish standards for reclaimed water that eliminate public health threats from nutrients, pharmaceuticals, endocrine disruptors, and also other contaminants of emerging concern, right, PFAS, that sort of stuff. So when it comes to consumptive use policy, we definitely support creating a water budget based on the availability of groundwater. We also want to make sure we have monitoring use by permit holders, right? Currently, the various water management districts don't do a good enough job on actually monitoring the use by permit holders. And also we want to see limiting permits to withdrawals that will not harm natural systems. That's in reference to the 2016 Will Not Harm Act. We use the term not harm rather than not significantly harm. And unfortunately, DEP has had, 6 years to kind of create a new harm act for when it comes to consumptive use permits. And unfortunately, it was literally a copy and paste of what the old one was. So they've failed right now in their draft rule for for a revision for the Harm Act that came from the 2016 legislature. We do support imposing fees for large water consumers, including agriculture, utilities, and also water bottling companies. Basically everyone should pay for the water they use. Everyone should pay a fair price as well. And again, it's worth saying again that water quality and quantity are inextricably linked. So we're going to get a little bit into biosolids. We don't have time to cover a lot of things that people probably will want to cover on biosolids if you've heard of this before, but biosolids is a euphemistic term for sewage sludge. It's a product of the wastewater treatment process. And basically during the wastewater treatment process, the liquids are separated from the solids. And then the solids are then treated physically and chemically to produce a semi-solid nutrient-rich product known as biosolids, right? Currently, there is kind of this inequity within the way that biosolids are regulated and also are applied between North Florida and also South Florida. Basically, North Florida is currently getting South Florida shit, and that's unfortunate reality. But we see a lot of the biosolids that come from human waste and within South Florida actually being shipped up and actually applied in various parts of North Florida, especially along the St. Johns River watershed basin. And we need to really find a way to actually create biosolids equity, right? That means that we want to make sure we have the same protections afforded to South Florida currently for North Florida, where we have Class B biosolids that avoid nutrient loading to waterways and or groundwater. And also, there's various classes of biosolids. There's Class Bs and there's also Class AA's, but we also want to see the regulation of Class AA biosolids in the same ways as Class Bs. And to the greatest extent practical, we'd like to see the removal of harmful contaminants such as PFAS or heavy metals and other legacy contaminants from sewage waste. And also to accomplish this, we definitely support various innovative technologies that can achieve those goals. So we don't have time to get into everything around Everglades restoration policy. Definitely invite you to invite Diana Umpiere, our Everglades restoration organizer, in a future meeting to kind of talk about Everglades restoration. But basically in a nutshell, and also I know a lot of you on the call are probably experts in Everglades restoration stuff. But the greatest extent practically, we'd like to see a restoration of the historic river grass to the greatest extent practicable, both spatially and also functionally. And in our opinion, right, which the way we see to do that, right, is to acquire at least 100,000 acres of land within the Everglades agricultural area. And obviously under that umbrella, right, is to stop new roads and sprawl within that actually helps protect wildlife habitat, right, especially within the Western Everglades, where we're seeing quite a bit of threats within Collier and Lee County and Hendry and Glades counties, right? But we definitely want to support keeping that space open land, right? So we can actually try and recreate that historic hydrological flow for the Everglades system. The Everglades Agricultural Area Storage Reservoir is not really a solution as we see it. It's not the crown jewel of the Everglades restoration, as Governor DeSantis oftentimes tries to tout it as. We see this as basically a mini Lake O, right? It's another hard infrastructure plumbing project that is not true restoration. It'll just not really accomplish the goals as far as sending more water south. That actually is of good quality. So I'm sure people have seen some version of this image in the past, right? We have the historic flow on the left-hand side and also the current flow on the right-hand side. And at the very heart of this system is Lake Okeechobee, right? It's oftentimes called the liquid heart of the Everglades, and for good reason, right? Basically during the rainy season, the water would spill over from the southern lip, right, and then slowly trickle down to the river grass until it actually reached Florida Bay and also Biscayne Bay as well, in various parts of the system. And that and other bays as well, St. Lucie and Martin counties and Palm Beach counties, obviously. And that system, right, was actually good at creating good aquifer replenishment, good way to actually provide for this entire river grass. And we saw that entire system become channelized and also canalized during the 20th century. And we saw various engineering projects done also within Lake Okeechobee for the benefit of claiming the land south of Lake O for Big Sugar, right? We saw engineering of making artificial connections with the St. Lucie River and also with the Club-Loxahatchee as well. And now we see these harmful discharges to the east and also the west. And that's where we kind of are within our system. We have overpollution of our waterways, and we have basically just discharging our excessive amounts of nutrient laden water to our east and west coasts when these estuaries can't handle this adversity. So that's unfortunately where we are right now within a lot of the Everglades restoration, and that's why we need to work as much as we can to send more water south when it comes to Everglades restoration. Ultimately, some folks might even been at this hearing, right, on the call when the district voted against buying the U.S. sugar land. But we do need to actually focus on buying more of the land within the Everglades agricultural area, so we can send more water south, right? Big Sugar, like any industry, doesn't want to willingly lose out on profits, despite all the consequences that we've seen with our water quality woes in the unrestored Everglades here in Florida. So here's the bottom line, folks. We have an externalization of costs, right? We have very well established systems for externalizing the costs from these various harmful algae blooms. The state, Florida, whether it be the Department of Environmental Protection or the water management districts or FDACs, does not regulate polluters who send so much of their nitrogen, also phosphorus pollution into our receiving water bodies, and it does nothing to actually prevent toxic algae outbreaks. Instead of taking care of pollution, cleaning up their own mess, right? Polluters, right, are able to take that and just dump it onto our backyards, our taxpayers, right? And really, they're dumping their garbage, their pollution, into our waterways and our commons, and making us, the public, pay up for their mess. So current Florida policy focuses more on costly cleanups rather than pollution prevention strategies, and really creates this never-ending cleanup treadmill. And this cleanup treadmill, right, we're also currently on an advocacy treadmill as well, right? We are, as across the state, I think there's not enough organizations that are doing the jobs that are needed to do to actually build up grassroots movements, to actually get people to come out to county commission meetings or to come out to public hearings at various water management district hearings, and actually kind of create the crowds and also the vigilant civil society that we need to really get ourselves off this advocacy treadmills, right? Like people can write all their letters and they want, or also to be policy wonks and experts, but really advocacy alone is really rarely enough to get the big jobs done right. I think we've all been kind of disrupted by the pandemic and the restrictions we've had the last 2-3 years. But I think as a community, with to begin reflecting, how is it that we can actually begin rocking the boat? Because if we don't rock the boat, if we don't actually get, make some trouble, right? If we're not actually good troublemakers, we're going to see a continuation of the status quo. And that's the reality of the situation, guys. I'm not, I'll be honest with you on that one. Things don't happen unless you demand it, unless you speak truth to power. So I think, as a community, we have to begin thinking about how do we do more stuff like this, right? How do we create big press conferences that really, help to reframe the narrative, right? Don't let people off the hook. We need to think about how we can do some of these rallies again as a community.
We're fighting money.
Yeah, we are. Yeah, we are, Ed. Yeah. But we're never gonna have more money than our opponents, right? But we do have people power though. And that's what our job is as a grassroots organization is to kind of begin looking at building grassroots power as well. So what can you do? I know a lot of this can kind of feel overwhelming. And I'll admit, it's a pretty sobering situation when we look at, our current water quality woes and, the rest of the planet's woes as well. But, I think we have to always remember that we do need to organize our communities. We need to do more around community outreach. I heard Linda mentioned some public hearings are happening over in St. Lucie County and also Martin County. Make sure you bring some of your neighbors to those, right? Figure out how you can get a crowd there. Do the community outreach, right? If you do live on a septic system, make sure you get that inspected regularly. That's a pretty simple thing you can do, right? Everyone can always write a letter to the editor, an op-ed. It's always good to kind of time that sort of stuff with a public hearing as well. Just kind of get some earned media. Make sure you have a relationship with your elected officials, city, county, your legislators, right? Both the House and also Senate. Make time to meet with them, right? Understand what their priorities are. Make a relationship with them. Use your role as a Sierra Club member or a active member of the Loxahatchee group, right? With information you receive in these various meetings to kind of let them know about the things that you care about as a constituent, right? And meet with them regularly, right? You just can't only meet with them during the legislative session. You have to meet with them, like maybe try and meet with them once a quarter, right? Develop that relationship so that when you call upon them during the legislative session, you say, I don't support this bill because it's bad for X, Y, and Z reasons. You get that action from Sierra Club, like they'll actually recognize your name, right? And you can actually, have a relationship with their aide as well, and you can get a meeting with them. So, the delegation meetings are coming up, in December, which is, might seem like a long way away, but it's not. And, we're going to have our legislative priorities. So make sure that, you're kind of staying abreast with that. And make sure you follow your local urban fertilizer ordinance. If you live in an HOA, make sure your HOA is following and also adhering to your fertilizer ordinance, right? No fertilizer fee applied from June 1st till September 30th if you live in St. Lucie and Martin counties. It's the law. Right? And then if you happen to live in Palm Beach County, I'd be happy to share some resources with you all about how you can organize to pass a county-wide local fertilizer ordinance as well. And of course, ditch the lawn and encourage instead native plant landscaping. So, just one caveat for Palm Beach County. The West Palm Village has one, North Palm Beach has one, and also the town of Jupiter has one, and finally the city of Palm Beach has one. But there's not a countywide one that covers the entire county and also helps to direct countywide staff and resources for making sure that there's compliance and also adherence to that ordinance. So that's one caveat I want to provide for Palm Beach County before people start telling me that, well, we have one in West Palm Beach, anyways, but so that's all I have. Questions. I know there's a lot of questions in the chat. I hope I answered people's questions.
Well, I have one argument I like to make, that the media are at fault in Florida. Newspapers and TV do not have environmental reporters for the most part. They don't have some systematic coverage of important environmental issues. And that's why the public most of the public is unaware. I mean, there are Sierra Club members as a small percentage of the population, and we need to demand that the media, not only newspapers, but TV, start covering these crucial environmental issues which are affecting the quality of life of people in Florida.
Yeah, I agree. And also, Bruce, to that point as well, we've also seen, a lot of local papers have their budgets slashed as well, because there's just not enough people actually subscribing to local papers anymore, and they just can't have the staff to actually cover all the environmental issues they want to. So it's kind of like, it's two things, right? We've seen a lot of companies, newspapers sell out to larger networks like Gannett or whatever else. And I think we also have a responsibility to basically subscribe to our local papers or multiple papers, right? So we make sure we have reporters for that. I'm just going to take some other questions in the chat.
Yep, I got some questions.
Yeah, of course. Go ahead, Glenn.
Linda is asking if it is against the law to apply fertilizer on the lawns in the summer. Why can you buy it at Lowe's and Home Depot? And why don't you get an ordinance to attach to each bag?
Yep. Okay. Very good question, Lyndon. I was prepared for that question. Good. I'll have to ask that question, right? So the legislature unfortunately preempted the ability to actually enact a sales ban, as you're talking about, for non-compliant products that basically contain nitrogen and phosphorus back in 2011. And basically this kind of tied the hands of local governments, right? Ultimately, we need to see that preemption bill be repealed, right? So we can let local governments lead. So we can actually create a sales ban that ensures that we can get, we can make sure these non-compliant products are not available during the rainy season. Certain counties actually Martin County actually has provision within their ordinance that actually that requires a sign like in a conspicuous location at the point of sale. Orange County has that as well, but not all ordinances have that, right? And that's one thing that can be used as a kind of a public education thing at the point of sale to basically say that if you apply this on your lawn, right, it's going to hurt the lagoon, you know, it's going to hurt our springs, that sort of thing. So I hope that answers your question. Why didn't you get ordinance info attached to each bag? Yeah, because that's just because, I mean, that basically FDAX is able to regulate that. They you know, you can't attach it with each bag, unfortunately, right now, because of the way they've, you know, preempted that. So.
Okay. Al Tilson, in the last legislative session, there was a failed effort to implement portions of the recommendations of the governor's blue and green algae task force that you mentioned earlier.
Mm-hmm.
What role did the Florida chapter and its lobbying offices play on this issue?
We played a role. The organization that probably spearhead that effort the most was Florida Springs Council, who we work very much in partnership with around our various lobbying activities within the legislature. We knew that bill didn't have as much traction, unfortunately, as it could have been. The reason being for it was that Senator Albritton, who was on the committee for agriculture and also environmental resources, was going to kill it. And Albritton is also now, you know, going to be the future Senate president as well. So doesn't look super great in the future. It's a tough world out there in the legislature, guys. It's a tough world.
Okay. Kathleen is asking, please sign and share volunteer phosphate amendment, creating a fundamental right to clean air and healthy waters. And then there's an email there. You can do that on the bottom. It's in the chat. Florida right to clean water .org. And let's see, Anthony Schreiber, I would be guilty of a declaration of my duties if I didn't mention that the work that Michael and the rest of the Sierra Club Florida does cost money. If you or any of you would like to make a gift today in the near future, although you will be hold on, I gotta scroll down.
Well, we seem to have Anthony here. Anthony's from our advancement department. Yeah. Anthony is wonderful, and you know, Anthony was with the Loxahatchee group for some time actually before he moved away. Anthony can, I guess, speak to that.
Yeah, so. Go ahead, Anthony.
Greetings, everybody. I just wanted to quickly remind everybody that the work that Michael does and that the rest of Sierra Club Florida does, it does cost money. And if any of you would like to make a gift, either today, in the near future, or through your will or trust, you can either reach out to me or any of the Sierra Club Florida staff members who can help you. We can make sure that the gift that you make either now or through your estate plans is used for whatever issues are closest and near and dear to your heart. Or simply, sometimes people will say a geographical area. I would like my donation to stay in Florida or to, you know, do work for Florida. So we can make sure that that is a stipulation in any gifts that you give. It really is as easy as inserting one sentence into your will or your trust to make sure that your support of Sierra Club lives on into the future. So if you wish to chat about, you know, giving or supporting Sierra Club, again, you can either contact me or anybody in Sierra Club Florida who you already have an existing relationship with, and they can help guide you.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Anthony. Yeah, it's you know, unfortunately, our campaigns do cost money because we do spend quite a bit of money on, you know, making sure we actually be a very robust and engaged grassroots movement. So yeah, definitely consider donating in that way if you're able to, and we definitely make good use of the funds. So I'm gonna try and go through some of these other questions. So are there current regulations that require septic tank inspections in any county? No, that's actually one of the recommendations of the Blue Green Algae Task Force that has not been implemented. right, is actually make mandatory inspections for septic tanks. That currently does not exist across a statewide vision across Florida. I don't know on a county by county basis. I don't know that off the top of my head, but I would imagine that that's not the case.
There was a bill that came from one of the GOP state leaders, and it failed. You know, he's from Sarasota. I happened to find in my research, it costs about, I don't know, $360 to have these septic tanks inspected, and people don't keep track of it anyway. But if the septic tank becomes, we'll say, clogged, what happens is the bio soil goes into the leach beds, and then if they're jammed up, that costs $10,000 to replace them. It's a sticky issue with money here, and I don't know. Then where the state's going to have to put out inspectors for 2 million septic tanks, and that's another problem.
Yeah, again, and also I think one thing I just want to again address, right, is that a lot of times, people will talk about septic tanks as being the main issue within, Florida's water quality woes. And I just want to emphasize the fact that, agricultural pollution is the biggest thing that needs to be addressed for most of our watersheds. And something that we need to continue to make sure that we're addressing, because the governor will constantly say, oh, we're putting all this money towards septic tank conversions and whatnot. So just want to, again, put it out there. It's oftentimes something that's used within the public narrative to kind of help protect the agriculture industry. Let's see, what else do we have as far as questions? Are we keeping track of everything that DeSantis has done as failures? Yes, of course. That's part of the reason why we're proud to endorse Charlie Crist, because we feel like that he is a better governor candidate, if we will actually address, our water quality woes. I mean, as folks might recall, if it wasn't for the recession, Charlie Crist was working to broker a deal that would have bought out a lot of the land within the Everglades agricultural area as well. Well, what other questions we have? But yeah, we're definitely be using that as as part of our strategy to help make sure that we elect Charlie Crist to replace Governor DeSantis as governor in November. PFAS, have you heard about that? I don't know about the EPA water testing methods rules that are set as related to PFAS. I'm not an expert on PFAS, to be honest with you. I know that there's excessive PFAS within biosolids, and again, we need more innovative technologies to help remove some of those harmful contaminants. But yeah, I'm not unfortunately an expert on that one, so I can't answer that question. What would be DeSantis' grade on water quality stuff? I will work and find the report card, because I don't want to misspeak and say what kind of grade we gave him for water quality stuff, but I don't think it's very good. I think it's like a D or something like that, if I remember correctly. Are there any public agencies that can be called upon to assess the quality of waters on private properties, e.g. wells, ponds, etc.? I think your DEP can do that, as well as your IFAS extension office. I think would be a good resource to look into that, as well as the water management district. So the consortium of those three might be able to help you with that sort of stuff. Other questions folks have?
I don't see any.
Well, I think one thing I do want to kind of challenge folks again, right, is as far as what can be done, right, is we need more of this, right? We need more organizing. We need our local groups to really kind of think about, how can we do things that actually going to move the needle, get the press involved, help change the narrative, right, on this sort of stuff. And COVID's been tough the last 2.5, 3 years, right? But we're now able to do more things in person, and I think we need to figure out how do we reinsert ourselves and get off this advocacy treadmill, which we're currently on, right? And actually begin to build grassroots movements that actually, show that there's people power out there, and people are not just be complacent and settle for the status quo. So that's all I'll say. Yeah. I see that there's some questions about the endorsement list. I'll find the endorsement list and I'll drop in the chat real quick.
Okay, cool.
Okay, thank you. If we've kind of gotten toward the end of the questions we're asking you, we might move to the mystery question, which is the question you asked us to answer. So everybody hover their fingers over the chat. And the question is, why is blue-green algae not a true algae? Do, do, do,
Oh, that's-
do. This is the quiz. It's got a long name, but we'll take a short name too. Anybody?
Oh, look at that. Tiffany got it. Here we go. Or Maria got it also, yeah.
Oh,
No.
who was first? Who was first?
Hold on. Where's my-
Oh my goodness.
Tiffany said it first, or texted it first, I guess.
Oh, yeah.
So
Yeah, I was gonna
really?
have to give credit for bacteria instead of the cyanobacteria.
cyanobacteria, yes. It's
It's
technically
like
not
I can
algae.
see that being a problem.
Yep. Isn't that weird, huh? But I probably just confused folks now, but I want to be scientific and wonky with you. So now you can have a little bit more scientific literacy. And thank you for being here tonight. Thanks for listening to my presentation. And hopefully, you know, we learn a little bit more about why the state's failing to actually address pollution to our waterways and, you know, what can be done. So thank you so much for all being here tonight. Again, be sure to meet with your legislators, your local electeds. Just request a meeting, you know, meet with them, right, and share where your concerns are. It'll help a lot when we get into the political session, the legislative session, to actually make sure that we can actually have the policies we need for addressing water quality issues within Florida. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Michael.
Yeah,
Thank
thank
you,
you very much.
everyone. We're going to have a little open mic session right now, so I am going to turn off the recording.